to introduce my brother, Brian. Brian has been at Annapolis since the 6th grade. Brian will be attending Texas A&M College Station to obtain his bachelor's degree in engineering. He later hopes to achieve his goal in working for SpaceX or NASA. Brian's thesis today is about immigration ethics. So will you please help me welcome Brian Lopez?
Hi. Happy Cinco de Mayo. It's one of my favorite holidays. I'm telling y'all, the only thing that's gonna get me through this speech is the fact that I'm gonna have guacamole and chips later. So, thank you, Mom. What makes the United States great? It's a simple question that's difficult to answer. Many authors have pondered the same question and all have arrived at the same conclusion. What makes the United States great is their people, their diversity, and their cultures, all in the pursuit of the American dream. In the new Colossus, Emma Lazarus imagines the Statue of Liberty as the mother of exiles and as a beacon of light and hope to the wretched immigrants as she encourages them to seek refuge in the land of opportunity and the home of the American dream. As she writes, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Lazarus stresses that the diversity of these people make America, America. Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby realizes that this American dream is not rooted in material wealth, but in obtaining the seemingly unobtainable. That unattainable something for immigrants is naturalization. The United States has fallen from its previous greatness, now detaining any and all immigrants entry into our nation. The Trump administration and the Immigration Customs Enforcement adopted a zero-tolerance policy on these immigrants. Why should the United States scorn and reject those that ultimately define us? The United States had not always acted bitterly towards these immigrants. Instead, there was a time when we welcomed them with open arms. Operational from 1855 to 1890, Castle Garden was the New York Immigration Center, wherein it saw 8 million immigrants pass through its doors, constituting the first large wave of immigrants. However, due to numerous economic and religious stresses in Europe, Castle Garden would simply not be able to satisfy the massive oncoming exodus that would soon take place. Thus, Ellis Island was born. History was made that New Year's Day, 1892, when Annie Moore and her two brothers became the first naturalized citizens processed at Ellis Island, paving the way for 12 million more to be processed there in its 62-year lifespan. Now, will you do me a favor and close your eyes? Imagine life as an illegal immigrant, a life of illegality with no documentation, a life of constant fear with danger lurking around every corner, a life of lying to survive, a life of hiding out of secrecy, a life of racial prejudice and taboo, a life of little to no freedom, and a life of vain hope with a low chance of naturalization. Your imagination is the sad reality of millions of undocumented immigrant families in the United States. Society gives illegal immigrants their own scarlet letter, but instead of an adulterous A imprinted on their chest, they bear an illegal I. The United States must alter its policies on the undocumented immigrant population to help them naturalize and reconsider their general stance on immigration. First, I will manifest the many biblical immigration stories, which holds its relevance throughout all of time. Next, I will refute the claim that immigrants detract from the United States. Instead, they only ameliorate it. Finally, I will adopt a libertarian position on immigration and defend the rights of the immigrant. Immigration has its roots in biblical stories, spanning from Genesis to Revelation. After the inevitable fall of Adam and Eve, God first protects them from life outside of Eden by creating skins for them. Here, God establishes mercy towards the immigrant and love to all, despite their previous misconduct. Exodus has the most well-known immigration story. The book of Exodus recounts the struggles of Israelite life and their subsequent migration from their poverty-stricken lives in Egypt to their ultimate destinies in the promised land Canaan. As God appears to Moses through a burning bush, God confides in him to deliver his people from the hands of the Egyptians. After the parting and crossing of the Red Sea, the Israelites were saved by God from Egypt and looked onwards to Canaan. The story of the Exodus shows that God will never forget the immigrant during his travels from his terrible life to a better one. Yet, God still shows how one should treat immigrants from a human perspective. God reminds the people of their heritage, reasoning that everyone at some time was a stranger in a foreign country. They should all be treated equally. Later, this fact is emphasized in Deuteronomy 24:17, saying, you shall not pervert the justice due to the sojourner. The book of Ruth is the ultimate immigration story. As recently widowed Naomi prepares to return to her homeland, Bethlehem, she commands her two Moabite daughter-in-laws, Oprah and Ruth, to remain in Moab to find suitable husbands. Ruth famously decides to go alongside Naomi in her travels, proclaiming, your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. However, according to traditional Torah law, this act was illegal. In Deuteronomy 23:3, it states, neither Ammonites nor Moabites shall enter into the assembly of the Lord. As Ruth begins to take care of Naomi by providing her with food and support, Boaz takes heed of her generous nature and seeks to protect her. He first protects her by personally giving her his food, demonstrating to everyone that Ruth should be treated with kindness and respect. Furthermore, he protects her by telling his workers to leave extra food for her and Naomi. These actions reveal Boaz as the ideal relief to immigrants, a person of pity, prayer, provision, and protection. Ruth and Boaz eventually marry and beget children. Now, as you all may know, Ruth is a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. Thus, without Ruth's immigration, the birth of Jesus Christ would not hold the same significance as it does today. The four Gospels show that Jesus Christ was an immigrant incarnate. To be an immigrant, one must travel from native territory to foreign territory with intentions to settle and reside there, as Jesus does. According to John, Jesus Christ came down from heaven and is not of this world. Thus, Jesus Christ is, in fact, an immigrant. Jesus Christ lived the life of an immigrant, and he died the death of one. Yet after living a righteous life, he was betrayed by one of his own and condemned to die via crucifixion. He was considered unworthy to die inside Jerusalem, thereby giving him a foreigner's death. Hebrews 13:12 states, therefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people, suffered outside the gate. All of humanity, you and I include, all of humanity owes their salvation to an immigrant. The Bible comes full circle, beginning and ending with a migration story. The Bible opens with the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. It closes with the promise of a new heaven and a new earth with a new Jerusalem, as John is exiled on the island of Patmos. When these promises come to pass, the migration story of the Bible will be complete. The Bible emphasizes the primacy of the immigrant individual, a fact that the United States too often forgets. Despite their notorious reputation of depriving native-born citizens, immigrants actually improve the states, and if they are to be removed from this nation, the United States would greatly reap its losses. Unbeknownst to them, most citizens live amongst immigrants who make up a decent percentage of the population. According to the American Immigration Council, nearly 14% of the population was composed of immigrants in 2019, totaling circa 44,933,000 persons. Of this number, there are 10,977,000 unauthorized immigrants. Though immigrant education falters from the national average, immigrants compose the majority of the United States workforce or labor force. Nearly a quarter of immigrants have a high school diploma, and a fifth have a collegiate bachelor's degree. This fact, combined with their subpar language skills, irrelevant work credentials, and discrimination, makes it unnecessarily difficult for immigrants to attain and maintain a continual source of income. Thus, first-generation immigrants settle for blue-collar work, holding sizable shares of necessary jobs spanning from the food sector, farming and fishing, for example, to construction. While the contribution is less, undocumented immigrants still contribute to the workforce and the United States economy. Still, according to According to the Pew Research Center, the unauthorized immigrant population has been in a recent decline, and our economy has slowly begun to deteriorate. As Robert Kaplan, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, noted, President Trump's immigration crackdown on both legal and illegal immigration has already been hurting the national economy, as immigrants fearful of deportation stay home and cut their spending. It is estimated that undocumented workers contribute a gain of 3 million jobs and generate 32 billion tax dollars in Texas alone. One could only imagine their net contribution to the United States in its entirety. The United States birth rate has been in a recent decline, which holds its own series of consequences. The historical birth rate, the ratio between the number of births and the total population of the given year, lies between 14 and 15%. However, the number has remained static at 12%, a significant decrease. If the native-born United States population ceases to effectively reproduce, then the labor force will suffer, the economy and the housing market will inevitably crash, amongst other things. Thus, the declining birth rate leads to the importance of immigrant children. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, a quarter of all children in the United States live with at least one immigrant parent, totaling around 18,400,000 children. While first-generation immigrants are more likely to show downward socioeconomic mobility, their children, second-generation immigrants, tend to show upward mobility. However, it should be noted that given enough time, these first-generation immigrants will asymptotically reach similar levels of native-born successes due to their assimilation into the job market and better education and language skills. Nevertheless, because of their parents' countless sacrifices, lower salary, high unemployment rates, insufficient language skills, and discrimination, their children can reap benefits they never could. Unlike their parents, the overwhelming majority graduate from high school and are more likely to receive a collegiate education. Thus, their earnings, employment rates, and unemployment rates are asymptotically closer to those of natives, compared relatively to first-generation immigrants. Moreover, some perform better than their native peers, yet the majority follow closely behind. Thus, there is a direct correlation between the declining birth rate and second-generation children's ability to asymptotically perform as well as or better than their native-born counterparts. Now, immigrants are essential to the success of America. Now, a world without immigrants seems uninhabitable. It is, but imagine it anyway. Take away their presence and the American economy loses trillions of dollars. Take away their lives here and the American society loses billions of dollars of taxes. Take away their businesses and tens of billions are lost in revenue. Gone are their intellect and technological advancements, and the United States loses educated personas. Say goodbye to the jobs they add to the economy. In fact, if there was no immigration controversy, then there would be no border patrol jobs. Say farewell to the grit and determination that make the American dream possible. If the states were to fully close its borders, detaining any and all immigrants, the nation would slowly crumble. The United States simply cannot function as it does now without immigrants. Now, no one can doubt the sheer validity and relevance the Declaration of Independence has on not only our nation, but on our people. Though most citizens subscribe themselves to the two main political branches, Republican and Democrat, there is a minority that fully partakes in a third, libertarianism, a philosophy that is centered around and focused on the primacy of individual rights and liberty. Moreover, the Declaration of Independence is imbued with libertarian beliefs and ideals, as stated above. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. According to this legislation, all human beings have identical rights. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty universally declares that no sovereign nation whose flag is planted on the lunar surface can own the moon. This fact is true of the Earth in its entirety, made evident in the Bible. According to Psalms 115:16, the heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. Thus, no human institution, a government, or the like, has the power to suppress an individual's fundamental rights, some of which are the right to migrate and the right to reside where one pleases. This is actually outlined in the Declaration of Independence. He, speaking of King George III, has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. Because the United States did not agree with the King's immigration policy, they severed all ties from the British monarchy, following their own doctrine, that whenever any form of government becomes the structures of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers on such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. However, though it is not practical to allow any individual onto these lands, it is still not pragmatic to deter individuals from the United States, seeing the immense contribution that they add to the American society and economy. Like its past in Ellis Island, the United States should deter those that pose a threat to the American populace through crime or disease. Luckily, there is a moderate solution: homesteading. Homesteading allows for either an alien or an immigrant to be peacefully invited to the United States by a current citizen. According to Rothbard, the homesteading principle means that the way that unowned property gets into private ownership is by the principle that this property justly belongs to the person who finds it, occupies it, and transforms it by his labor. As a side note, it should be duly noted that the libertarian believes in a limited role of the government, full private property rights, and the rule of law. Thus, combining the two former principles concludes that the government should not own land that could be potentially occupied by an immigrant. For homesteading to prove effective, the people of the United States must privatize all property. Henceforth, any homesteader could be admitted to the United States by any current citizen and allowed to remain in a piece of land to transform it and ameliorate it, marking it his property. The Biden administration seeks to undo the work the Trump administration had done to deter naturalization for immigrants. Within hours of the genesis of his presidency, President Biden had forcefully begun to reshape this nation's immigration policy. He introduced legislation, dubbed the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, which seeks to provide an earned path to citizenship to address the root causes of migration and responsibly manage the southern border, and to reform the immigrant visa system. The United States must change its immigration policy, but it is much more difficult to find a solution to the millions of illegal immigrants within its borders. Today, undocumented immigrants already in the United States have difficulties naturalizing and applying for citizenship quickly. Despite a non-citizen being in the United States for years and years, there is no way to quickly obtain legal status. The main issue lies in eligibility for the citizenship application. The United States must issue more ways to naturalize. Despite the Biden administration's efforts to reverse the immigration policy set by the Trump administration, there is still an ongoing crisis at the U.S.-Mexican border. Ongoing violence and economic strife have prompted Central Americans to seek asylum from their countries to the United States. The situation in their own countries has intensified to outrageous proportions that Lissy Sopal feared for her own life. "I had only two choices," she says: leave Honduras and live, or stay and die. Those undergoing the journey are not only grown adults, but also unaccompanied children. This decision is not an easy one for families to make, when knowing that their children will have to face numerous dangers and obstacles to reach the holy grail that is the United States. Human trafficking, kidnapping, slavery, and risk of death are all possible dangers. Still, when they arrive in the United States, if they arrive, there are only a limited number of beds available, and have to patiently wait to be sent out to their families already living in the United States. It is with great certainty that there will always be a crisis at the southern border unless the Mexican government is radically transformed from corruption. Yet, the crisis still exists. People will always sneak past the border in hopes of a better life. Children will unfortunately be separated from their families, and aliens will be deported to once again survive the struggles of their native country. The United States has been defined, is defined, and will always be defined by its people. The United States must grant immigrants entry and aliens naturalization. Though immigrants will have a difficult time adjusting to life in the United States, their struggles will come to fruition in the end. I was born on this American soil some 18 years ago, and I have flourished to become the man seen today. I've risen to impressive ranks, and my accomplishments have been made possible by my two immigrant parents. Mr. and Mrs. Lopez, will you please stand up? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
So you started your discussion by saying that it is the people. Is this on? Yes. By saying that it is the people that make this nation great. And I'm a little confused because in my understanding, it is a system of values ruled by law that promotes freedom, that's what makes the nation great, and that the nation is only as great as the citizenry that obeys those laws, that comes underneath them. And so it sounds to me like you're elevating the people above the law and the system of freedoms that have been enumerated by the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Could you address that, please, as why you think that, people above law is what's going to make the nation great rather than a people under the law?
Yes, ma'am. Recently, our recent governments have been somewhat corrupt, like the situation in Mexico. And there is always a higher calling, there is always a higher law that Christians have to conform to, and that is the two golden rules: treat your neighbor as yourself, and to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your understanding. So as Christians and as the people of the United States who are conformed to Christian beliefs, there is a higher calling, and we have to follow that law higher than the ones currently set by the United States government.
Okay. So, in thinking about societies and how they operate, if you think about it, every society has litmus tests for entrance. For example, I just had a son get married, and so now we have a new daughter-in-law. There was a litmus test for her coming into the family. For church membership, there's a litmus test. For entrance to this school, there are faith requirements. Employment opportunities, even gaining eternal life, Jesus says that there is a litmus test for entrance. So it makes sense to me that a nation should have a litmus test to determine what kind of citizens or what kind of people are qualified to come in and what kind of people are not qualified to come in. So, for example, I'm thinking about the recent events in Europe where there was borders were taken down and Muslims were allowed to come across without impunity, and there was such a breakdown of civil order with marauding gangs, going through the streets, taking down their culture, great fear. It completely broke down civilization over there. What do you think about that? That it should be right to have a litmus test for entrance into this culture, and that law-abiding should be primary?
Yes, that is true. There should be a litmus test, but the main issue with the United States immigration policy is that there are millions of illegal immigrants that currently reside in our nation, around 10,977,000. And the United States has been slow to react to those people, and they've been waiting for 20 plus years to actually naturalize. The issue lies in waiting and actually being eligible to take that said test and become an actual United States citizen. But yes, for those that are currently in foreign countries and are seeking to become citizens of the United States, there are applications, and there are, even for asylum seekers, there are applications and there are tests to determine whether you are eligible to become a United States citizen. But for now, illegal immigrants, the United States just simply must issue more ways to naturalize for illegal immigrants currently.
Great job, Brian.
Thank you.
I got the privilege of hearing it several times as you were actually practicing, so excellent work. My question is, you mentioned about just the number of immigrants, both legal and illegal, that are in the American economy. And my question is that creating an overdependence on immigrations and immigrants, and it's actually at the detriment of kind of the American work ethic and values that we have now kind of forfeited things that as an American society have made us great, as far as like working our way up, making ourselves better, and that we've actually deferred some of those things to this population, and it's actually undermining the American work ethic and American values. What would you say to that?
Well, actually, immigrants do not detract from the workload of American citizens. In fact, they help them work harder and actually produce more income, which produces a greater impact on the economy. Immigrants are more likely to travel throughout the United States, as research shows, which I included in my paper. They are more willing to travel within the United States to do certain jobs, allowing for the American citizens to remain home and contribute and work harder to contribute more to their companies, their businesses, and thus to the economy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great job, Brian. You've made me very proud.
Thank you.
Your use of classical sources is exemplary, and I'm really
Thank
proud
you.
of you. My question kind of ties together with Mrs. Carter's, and I wanted to get even more specific on, given that you're arguing for a general framework, an emotional status, a standpoint of a culture to want to embrace immigrants with open arms, but you simultaneously hold to a litmus test. What exactly do you think that litmus test should be for the United States in particular? And then do you believe that whatever that is, do you think that's objective for all nations everywhere or just for the United States? That's a big question, but yeah.
Well, I think the basics are very necessary, such as a basic understanding of the English language, a basic understanding of our history and our culture, I believe basic education are also very necessary, just for assimilation into jobs, because if an individual does not have certain education, then they will suffer very greatly in our college-based workforce. And so I think that should extend to all foreign countries, not particularly just the United States. So France should have those same exact litmus tests, and it should be just, yeah.
Thank you. So reception and assimilation, is that
Yes,
kind of the,
yes, sir.
okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Appreciate it, buddy. Good job.